from your perspective, the arrests were not because of a public safety threat. They were because of what?
Political. They wanted to shut this down. Somebody wants you locked up or trumped up charged, they can do it.
Yeah, the police can suck, and maybe this would have been a learning opportunity, but instead it was basically like, well, it's because the police work for the elites. What do you mean by elites? The elites are the ones who control us. The elites are the ones who are like, oh God, it's all Alex Jones. It's all basically garbled conspiracy theories mixed with a few slivers of truth, and the bad guys are cartoonish. And if the bad guys are cartoonish, then no one's going to like hold systems or structures of power to account. It's all just, once again, a massive distraction to keep everyone distracted. If you don't know, Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, is in the middle of trying to attack the poors. He wants to get rid of all the tents that keep popping up. It's a weird thing. We have the same problem in Vancouver. It's like when rent goes up, there's more homeless people, and then everyone gets really mad, and all the NIMBYs are like, not in my town, and then all the conservatives are like, hey, well, this is because they made poor life decisions, and then they get the cops to get rid of the tents and destroy their possessions, and then strangely enough, it doesn't solve the problem, and then there's a new tent city that pops up somewhere else, and it just rinse and repeat. This time, though, he's pushing some new draconian laws, and it's dividing the public. Ontarians are deeply divided over Premier Doug Ford's strategy for tackling homeless encampments, including his threatening use of the notwithstanding clause, with Ford bringing forward measures Thursday to give police and municipalities enhanced legislative powers to remove tent encampments from parks. Abacus data survey found little backing for the heavy-handed approach. Only 12% favored stronger law enforcement measures to clear encampments. This warms my soul, but it's not all good. But one-third, 34%, backed providing more affordable housing, with 60% supporting creating safe spaces and shelters, another 16% said increasing community-based support and outreach programs, and 14% recommending expanding access to mental health and addiction services. Still, 65% said they were concerned about the impact of encampments in their community, with 13% unconcerned, while 22% were neutral or had no opinion. Politically, whether you're a mayor, of a premier, or an MPP, homelessness is now a visual representation of a crisis people don't feel anybody's had a handle on. It's a reflection of how the system isn't working. I would argue it's the system working as is, unfortunately. The city of Toronto was able to clear encampments when Taylor Swift came. Same thing just happened here. If you didn't know, I live in Vancouver. I was the end of the Eras tour. So for all the Swifties out there, we were the last stop. Swiftie played 3 shows because Vancouver is at times a little bit of a cultural void. We actually turned the whole city into Taylor Swift land. It was really weird. There was all these monstrous Taylor Swift bracelets everywhere. There was like light shows. There was pop-up Sephoras. There was the whole city just became very Swift. And she played, and then she had this magical power that apparently she just made a lot of the homeless encampments and people disappear. I don't know where she puts them and where it happens to them and where they go. But I'm assuming there's some kind of policy where it's like, well, we're getting about 100,000 extra visitors for this event because, you know, it's the biggest pop star in the world. We don't want anyone to be taking pictures on the streets of Vancouver and show them the unwantables. So let's just make sure that they're put somewhere else temporarily. Ideally, I hope it's a shelter. I would assume so. I'm hoping it's a humane housing option for a little bit of time. Same as 2010. Yeah, exactly. The exact same as 2010. I'm not entirely sure what is going on, but it seems to be a policy. Then I saw this. There's a new book line talking about disaster nationalism. These are upsetting days for people who like democracy, sometimes known as liberal civilization. South Korea's president declared martial law and withdrew the declaration in 6 hours. Georgia's government insisted it had an elected fair and square, while thousands protested nightly in the streets. A Romanian court annulled its first round of the presidential election, blaming Russian interference and ordering a replay. Ukraine has endured daily attacks from Russia, with no firm guarantee of effectively support from the West after the end of the Biden administration. Closer to home, President Donald Trump continues to nominate professional scoundrels and scallywags to his cabinet. I just saw that the full list came out. The majority of them are like Fox News hosts. He's basically employing Fox News. He's like a welfare program for Fox. I think it has a lot more to do with just people he knows. Maybe it seems to be it. Like, doesn't one have to actually like be like, okay, sir, we have lots of potential candidates for each policy and each position, and we want you to go through this list. And you're like, no, you know, just like hire Fox, just hire the Fox guys. I like Fox. Disaster nationalism argues persuasively that Americans and Canadians aren't the only ones about to lose our democracy. It's happening all over the world. His work implies that if we understand what's happening, we have a better chance to frustrate it. But the Northern Irish political commentator and author warns it will not be easy. Disaster nationalism is the apocalyptic nationalism that has swept several far-right leaders into power and is now readying through more breakthroughs. In recent success of rightist politicians around the world point to a sobering fact in contemporary society, that people have voted them into power and have proved that millions will gladly, sometimes self-consciously hurt what they are told is in their best interest. Income, employment, health, and sometimes even lives can be sacrificed for the chance to destroy an enemy. The enemy is defined as an economic class, an ethnicity, a race, a religion, a political group that can be blamed, Seymour says. He cites social psychologist Michael Billig, who studied this fascist mentality. What distinguishes them, that, faced with abrupt and unwelcome changes, they tend to personalize the affection. Our misfortunes are not the result of systems or situations. Someone evil did this to us. More likely, several evil someones. To follow this logic means to deal with the conspiracy, which keeps the disaster personal. What needs to be destroyed, explains Seymour, it's not the system, but the personnel. Strikingly, the disasters that anger fascists are often something trivial, not the genuine and systemic problems facing the society. That's how violent storms and droughts can go ignored while politicians and their followers fret about culture war issues like who's using which bathroom. Or the idea that there are still Republicans and conservatives in the United States who think that Biden has a weather machine. I mean, he's only got about a month left. He better fucking activate the weather machine then and start using it for good. Because, again, moments remain. Disaster nationalism takes aim at sexualities and sexual expression that threaten what Seymour calls the sexual hegemony of straight bourgeois white people. He calls this porno nationalism and traces its roots to Gabriel D'Annunzio. By the way, it's not sexy. Don't get aroused. By implicitly justifying violence against its targets, porno nationalism offers fascists two things to appeal to their psyche that follow the logic of disaster nationalism: the excitement of hurting people and the avoidance of suspicion of being one of them. You know, you don't want to be one. Yeah, hey, are you gay? You better say no homo. I want to hear you say it. If you don't say no homo, I'm going to suspect that you're a homo, and then I'm going to suck your dick. Them's the rules, all right? The fascist culture industry was deliberately anti-political as it was anti-intellectual. Joseph Goebbels, the Reich propaganda minister, exhorted radio broadcasters, don't be boring. Under his stewardship, both radio and cinema producers reduced their political output with much more popular music, comedy, and costume drama. Culture war, just like cyber war, is most effective when it's done by politics by other means. And by cyber war, the deliberate spreading of misinformation and disinformation. From the United States to Russia, states have now been running troll farms, sock puppet accounts, and cyber war tactics, recruiting citizen soldiers in their millions, sometimes without being aware of it. In the new levée en masse, this top-down aspect is essential to the cyber war, the phenomenon of stochastic terrorism, where official incitement probability conditions the likelihood of a terrorist assault within a given population who would make no sense of it. And that's honestly how so many people have kind of hidden in the shadows, including fucking Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh, who's now getting rebranded by a lot of people who are complicit in that rebranding. You know, the whole fucking, I don't know if you saw Deadspin just did this review of Am I Racist? And then they're like, yeah, comedian Matt Walsh apparently looks at the entire industrial complex surrounding racism. And, you know, and I was like, this whole article completely leaves out all the fucked up stuff that he's both said and done for years. Absolutely ridiculous. Why are they ignoring it? The lone wolf to take issues with manifestos online as he begins killing, perhaps to provoke a race war, and also perhaps Seymour thinks hoping to be killed. Lone wolves get much attention both politically and in the public conversation, but national governments are the real experts in pogroms, which might defined as attacks on people because of who they are, not what they've done. In India, for example, Seymour writes Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as the chief magistrate of the Gujarat state, orchestrated anti-Muslim pogrom that was just the first in an ongoing series. The Gujarat pogrom demonstrated that far from damaging a rightist party, collective violence could be used amongst the materials out of which consent was built and coerced. It could summon broad popular support for that regime, like national movements in Hungary, Brazil, and the US, and imposing an otherwise unpopular autocratic neoliberalism. Yeah, and by the way, when I say neoliberal, there's still that the thing that the Republicans and the Democrats are both neoliberals. Yeah, unfortunately. And the Democrats are also kind of, at this point, you know, some of them are basically acting like diet Republicans. I just want to pull up what I'm talking about. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have cast decisive votes against Biden's NLRB nominee. That means that the Democrats will not secure control of the National Labor Regulator through 2026. These two senators effectively handed Trump control of the board when his term begins. Oh, Great work. Mansion, cinema. How are you still around? You're still doing damage, getting buyouts, payouts. Friend of the show, Rachel Gilmore, just testified in the parliamentary committee about Tenant, Tim Pool, and Russian interference.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. This is obviously a very important topic, and I have some big feelings about it. So to kick things off, I'm sure you all remember the Freedom Convoy, yeah? Well, as part of my coverage at the time, I joined several Telegram channels and groups where organizers and supporters gathered to exchange everything from planning details to fringe conspiracy theories. And you might not have realized this, but it was actually just days after the convoy, actually you guys probably do know this, just days after the convoy that Russia invaded Ukraine. So
telling Congress that you have big feelings about something, well, telling Parliament, but yeah, telling Parliament that you have big feelings about something, definitely a baller move.
It was really interesting, an interesting time to be monitoring all of those Telegram channels, because all of a sudden, the ones that have been posting about the convoy and COVID, groups with tens of thousands of members primed to distrust experts, government, media, and institutions, shifted to posting about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, often claiming that Russia's invasion was actually justified because of reasons the government and the mainstream media won't tell you. This illustrates something that experts have said time and time again. Russia identifies the areas where we're most prone to polarization and pours gasoline on the fire that we already built ourselves. Don't just take my word for it, though. You can take it from Russia. In the documents the DOJ released in September in the US, we saw details from Russia's Good Old USA project and its guerrilla media campaign in the United States. Those documents show Russia identified existing sources of polarization to then exploit. The, quote, campaign topics they plan to focus on included stuff like what they called the, quote, threat of crime coming from people of color and immigrants, and, quote, risk of job loss for white Americans, and what they called, quote, privileges for people of color, perverts, and disabled. So that gives you a sense of the kinds of divisions Russia focused on exacerbating. It's got a lot in common with what I would call the right-wing grifter sphere and what comes out of there, where people rail against immigration.
So obviously we're talking about Tenant, and we're talking about, you know, if you don't know, the TLDR is essentially a Canadian pundit called Lauren Chen, who I've never seen anyone get just so, like, excised since, like, Milo Yiannopoulos from the good graces of the right-wing fucking media apparatus. Like, no one wants to touch her anymore. They don't even say her name. I like, at least with Milo, they would be like, oh yeah, Milo's that, like, you know, pedophile who justified pedophilia or something like that. With Lauren Chen, they're like, yeah, so there was like a prominent person who worked at the Blaze. She was a commentator for the Blaze, that's all I'll say, and that she organized through a contact, apparently starting some new media company called Tenant, and, you know, it had a wealthy investor, and that's all I need to say about that, and that they offered me a comparable amount of money to the money I would get from anyone else, you know. This was Tim Pool justifying it both to Jank and Sam Cedar when they asked him about it, and he was like, well, I had multiple offers at the time. Can you say who they were? No. Okay, but you had multiple offers from other people, even though that's weird. You don't have to actually, like, did you sign NDAs just to be able to negotiate? Since you didn't take the deals, it's not actually going to be damaging to any potential future business venture, because either way, okay, fine. So you don't want to name who exactly were the other offers, but you said that you got multiple offers and that this one was comparable. So you had offers from other places that weren't Russian-backed billionaire oligarchs that turned out to be state-backed, you know, funding, that apparently were offering you over $100,000 per YouTube video to cut and paste intranet YouTube videos for a secondary channel that you had and then upload them, and that never raised any flags for you because that just seemed to be a regular amount of money that you're used to getting. Can I see it? Like, that's incredible.
Attack diversity and inclusion, pearl clutch about anti-white racism, and oppose trans rights. Like, those are the kinds of topics you hear from people like Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Lauren Southern. And those are the same influencers who ended up on the payroll at Tenant Media, which Russia was allegedly funding to spread its talking points. If we accept the premise that Russia never influenced their editorial decisions, as these influencers claimed after the fact, that implies these folks are so good at dividing and polarizing Western society that Russia likely saw it as a good investment to just fund them to make more of their organic content. Yikes. When we indulge in divisive, conspiratorial, and often hateful rhetoric, we are doing Russia a favor. Because a society that doesn't believe in institutions, in science, in journalism, in the validity of experts, in the value of taking care of each other and the importance of a shared reality is a society where democracy and stability is under threat. So a note to the politicians who use this same kind of divisive and conspiratorial rhetoric: consider what it means that Russia engages in the same tactics when it tries to undermine our democracy.
By the way, I do want to point out that that being said, we have just a little thing about some of the extremist ideology.
For more than 2 years, the Fifth Estate has been investigating what happened at the border blockade in Coutts, Alberta.
I hope every border in Canada is blocked. There's no excuses. This is war.
You might remember this as a trucking convoy that rallied against COVID-19 mandates and blocked traffic at a US-Canada border for about 2 weeks. A judge recently found that 2 protesters had armed themselves for a potential shootout with police. Some of the police evidence couldn't be made public until the trial was over. Now, we have exclusive access. What we obtained shows that the 2 protesters' actions were fueled by conspiracy theories and extremist beliefs.
When the elites win, we all lose, and we'll all be in a concentration camp then. Just like it was in Germany.
One of the most interesting parts of our investigation was the more than 13 hours of police interrogation video that we had a chance to review. The man you see in that video is Tony Olenek. He's one of 2 men convicted and sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for his involvement in the blockade. During the protest, Olenek and another man, Chris Carbert, stayed in this RV in the village of Coutts. Police later raided that RV and a nearby home and seized several firearms. 13 long guns, handguns, tactical gear, ammunition, and more. Police accused Olenek and Carbert of conspiring to murder officers, but that charge didn't hold up at trial. Instead, a jury found the men guilty of a firearms offense and mischief, and a judge accepted that verdict as proof that the men were prepared for a firefight with police. In interviews with police, Olenek and Carbert said they saw the pandemic as possibly leading to an inevitable collapse of society, and said they believed their way of life was under threat from the Canadian government.
I gotta be honest, it's just like, it's so wild how COVID-19 radicalized such a significant portion of the population. Whereas, like, I think there's a lot of people who just collectively were like, oh, okay, so apparently there is a novel virus. We unfortunately are now going to be living through a pandemic. There's a whole bunch of things that we need to do. We're going to be learning as we go. But if we work together, collectively, as a society, we can get through this. We need to help each other out. We need to social distance, we need to wear masks, we need to wash our hands. And if we do that, some lo-fi shit, I mean, we can make this better for everybody, especially for the healthcare workers who are now going to be going through a war zone. Because no one really realized that when it was really quiet on the streets and everyone was so bored and they're like, I've already watched Tiger King twice, how many times can I watch this fucking thing? I played through all my video games, come on, what am I supposed to do here? It was a nightmare in the hospitals. Even in countries that didn't suffer as badly as others, hospitals were a war zone. There's a massive amount of people who have like permanent PTSD who were working in the healthcare industry because they were just dealing with daily mass death and had no idea and were frightened and scared and frightened themselves that they were going to be the next ones because they're the ones just looking at people literally unable to breathe before them and thinking, oh my God, what if I get this deadly virus? And that was before there was vaccines or, you know, boosters or any of that kind of shit. So it was a wild time. For other people, just the idea of these measures being possible or existing made them suddenly like lose their shit. Where it's just like, no, I don't want to. And it's like, okay, we have to. I mean, it's this or mass death. I mean, grandma's gonna die, right? Like, you don't want grandma to die. No, I don't care. Grandma dies. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put on the cloth on my face. It's itchy. And you're like, well, come on. And then they just stay home. No, I don't want to stay home. I want to do stuff. I want to go out and stuff. Well, we can't do that anymore. Society's just gotta got to just chill for a little bit, you know, and everyone's got to make some sacrifices, sure, but I'd say in relativity, our sacrifices aren't really going to be that hard. We got Netflix, we got Nintendo Switch, you know, there's some new games coming out. It's going to be a little boring, yeah, and probably a little nightmarish. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if we all work together, that we as a society can help one each other out, and this could benefit all of us. No, I want to go to the bar, and I want to have a restaurant food. Yeah, I want to dance. Yeah, I want to go outside. It's just like, Jesus Christ. And from that, just exploded this new online world of like, did you know that apparently they were lying to us the entire time? Did you know that Anthony Fauci said one thing at one point during a novel virus and then said a different thing later? Did you know that apparently the Chinese have been concocting viruses in a secret lab, a biolab, if you will? Did you know that perhaps they released it for potential world control to dominate it? Did you know that the elites, the Davos group, the Bilderbergs, all of them have been working in conjunction? And I guess everyone had a lot more time. Everyone had a lot more time to be on the internet and be like, well, I guess I could do my own research. And I have found some obscure, you know, completely disgraced and discredited doctor on a Facebook group who is saying that apparently the virus isn't real and that the vaccine will give you AIDS and that it's part of a mind control chip that's going to get into you. And I feel that since then, it's fueled so many radical movements that range from, you know, the silly all the way to the extreme, dangerous, and the violent, you know, in conjunction with each other sometimes. Royzena, can I get an ooh-woo? Ooh-woo. Animal Crossing on the Switch helped so many people through the pandemic. I agree. I loved Animal Crossing. It was very chill. It was very wholesome. Very cute. I was often tending to my plants.
And a global network of elites.
They want to break the middle class, Andy, and you are in the middle class. I am in the middle class.
I'm probably too deep down the rabbit hole, but it scares me just from seeing all these elites doing what they're doing.
They had underlying sentiments and positionalities that were far-flung from what the average protester there might have felt. There were folks in society who didn't like the vaccination mandate, who had anti-government beliefs. But I think the average member of the public would draw a line once you start gathering firearms to take on the police.
Many insisted the men were wrongfully accused, heroes, even political prisoners. From your perspective, the arrests were not because of a public safety threat. They were because of what?
Political. They wanted to shut this down. Somebody wants you locked up or trumped up charge, they can do it.
While the RCMP were interviewing both men, they got court permission.
What sucks about all this is that, like, I feel that there could have been maybe an opportunity to teach a lot of people a lot of things, right? Especially white folk. Like, it seems like a lot of these groups, yes, they are not exclusively white by any stretch, but, like, there was a lot of white people who were trying to compare what was happening to them to apartheid. Or to the Holocaust, right? Being like, oh, there's a separate system, and then they're marking us, and they're putting bands on our arms in the form of vaccine cards, and there's a separate system of justice and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out the police might be corrupt, and the police have supreme power, and they're able to suddenly just stop us from doing whatever we want. And it's like, well, maybe because you haven't grown up in an environment where you've had to worry about that, you know? Like myself, for example, I haven't been worried about being racially profiled by the police in my lifetime. It's not something I've had to deal with. I've had to learn about it, and then you eventually start having, I'm sure, multicultural friends who have very different lived experiences and tell you about how they're racially profiled all the time. And yeah, the police can suck, and maybe this would have been a learning opportunity, but instead it was basically like, well, it's because the police work for the elites. What do you mean by elites? The elites are the ones who control us. The elites are the ones who are like, oh God, it's all Alex Jones. It's all basically fucking garbled conspiracy theories mixed with a few slivers of truth, and the bad guys are cartoonish. And if the bad guys are cartoonish, then no one's going to like hold systems or structures of power to account. It's all just, once again, a massive distraction to keep everyone distracted. Way down the bunny hole, they were always with us, but the pandemic broke their brains as they had supervision. Like, I unfortunately, it's so hard for me to have empathy or sympathy for people who are unable to do very basic things in a society where we had a lot of privilege compared to other parts of the world that were suffering immensely, that didn't have access to vaccines, that didn't have access to, high-speed internet, Netflix, video games, Animal Crossing, you name it. There's a lot of people around the world who just didn't have access to that. And for some folk, the idea of having to live in your own home, well, I mean, that's easier or better considering how nice your house is. The nicer your house is, the better those conditions are. And so for some other people, the idea was just like, well, I mean, if the government's telling me what to do, I don't want to do it because they're the elites.
A few days later to raid Olenik's property south of Calgary. This is where they found Olenik's journal. It gave them a window into his mind. He wrote about building a bunker, a coming apocalypse, and a 1,000-day war against Satan. They also found a stockpile of firearms and tactical gear. In this wooden box, 2 pipe bombs. Scattered across the property, more than 36,000 rounds of ammunition.
36,000 rounds is an astronomical amount of ammunition.
That's a lot of rounds. I don't know how many zombies you're thinking of killing. Also, I don't know what kind of gap could be bridged between the people who believe they're fighting a 1,000-year war against Satan. You know, I don't think there's like we need a lefty alternative to the 1,000 Satan war. Okay, the 1,000-year war against capitalism. Then, sure, is capitalism one of the many forms that Satan takes? He's very mysterious.
That's the preppers holding off the army coming their way.
The men said they were only there to defend, not attack.
You will not find anything that's planning on doing something. I can guarantee you that.
Our work on this case hasn't been easy. Navigating the courts is always difficult, and key evidence couldn't be published to protect the men's right to a fair trial. It was a complex legal minefield. We've repeatedly tried to get interviews with both men since their arrest and the conviction, but both declined. Olenik and Carbert have appealed their convictions and sentences. But just before our episode aired, Carbert called us from prison. He claimed his conviction is part of an elaborate setup by authorities. This sort of conspiracy theory and distrust of government is exactly what experts we spoke to warn of. They say this case reveals the dangers of extremist ideologies and their potential for violence, and how some
My ex wasn't into conspiracy theories about vaccine. He was just lazy and had no will to participate in his life or understand what he does affects others. But yeah, I mean, that like, I feel a lot of people were, unfortunately, just being dicks when it comes down to it, because again, the concept wasn't that difficult. It was like, hey, by the way, you don't want everyone to die, you don't want the healthcare system to be overrun. Well, let's just do some very simple measures: social distancing, limiting how much time you're in public gatherings and areas, wash your hands, wear a mask. It wasn't the worst things in the world. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't fun. I too don't enjoy having to wear a mask all day when I was in a public area, or not being able to see my friends or family. All of that was very distressing and sad and fucked up. But I think for the greater good of not having old people die or have the healthcare system destroyed, it was a pretty easy sacrifice in the scheme of things, right? Especially compared to like other generations. Like, I find it also pretty comical that the same people who talk about the fall of Rome, or how like men are soft now, the hard times create soft men create hard times and all that shit, or they invoke like World War II soldiers and D-Day and stuff, and I was like, both world wars, the conditions of sacrifice needed to be made during those periods of time were astronomically more difficult than what is being asked of us right now, which is just stay home and play video games, please. Like, don't stay home. Don't please leave your house, especially if you're sick. We've got to figure this one out. Come together right now. And unfortunately, my last little piece of bad news is that the mayor of Vancouver, his name is Ken Sim. This is what he looks like. He's very corrupt. He ran on a campaign of cops. He promised 100 more cops and 100 more nurses. Guess which one of the two he delivered on? The cops. So we got 100 more cops. He has also turned one of the government buildings that he turned it into a private gym. The TV crew came by and they were like, hey, what's that room for? And then he was like, oh, that? And then they went in and he had gym equipment set up there. And it was supposed to be a meeting room used by government officials, but instead it's his private gym. He now apparently wants to use a bunch of public funds to invest in cryptocurrency. He thinks it's the greatest invention ever in human history. Ken Sim has some strange connections to shady businesses, which I've documented before, but I wasn't expecting last week's announcement of a Vancouver Bitcoin reserve to be tied to the crypto advocate who funded the convoy. Buckle up. For those who haven't read my previous thread, Sim's declaration of investment includes Coutts Group, a company of one Sri Ram Tomori, who has lived in the Maltese hospital scam. This shit is crazy. Read it. ABC talks about public-private partnerships in the past, but they failed BC. That's because the PPPs are designed to enrich the private parties at the cost of the public. Here's the story of one. Could Vancouverites soon be crossing the London Drugs Burrard Street Bridge to get a privately managed Vancouver Aquatic Centre? Essentially, what he wants to do is sell all of the public buildings and have them be renamed, kind of like, you know how TYT is called the Polymarket Studios, or you might have a giant arena in your area. We have Rogers Arena. Rogers is a tech company, a mobile phone company, that he wants to do that for everything. So he wanted to give you the McDonald's freeway, the Starbucks swimming pool, like all that kind of shit, to try and get some extra cash. Well, a name popped up on the mayor's calendar recently, one Jay Booth. Then, roughly a month later, Sim announced a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So Jay Booth in crypto? Who could that be? It sure sounds like that Jeff Booth, the local Bitcoin advocate who gave a talk at the Terminal City Club back in January. Addy then posted about it. Why do I bring up Addy? Well, because Ken Sim invested in it. Nurse Next Door, Professional Homesick Services, Nurse Next Door Services, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so who's Jeff Booth? A quick glance doesn't really seem too interesting. He's your normal crypto bro character who has an okay understanding of crypto and somewhat poor understanding of economics. So, you know, crypto bro. Not bad, right? Except, oh, crypto enthusiasts keep funding convoy protests as traditional banks take action. Big funder of the Freedom Convoys. Until earlier this week, Mr. Booth also sat on the board of the Richmond Hospital Foundation in BC, but after an emergency meeting this week, he resigned from his duties with the hospital. While we very much appreciate Jeff's past contributions to our board, his affiliation is incompatible with our mission of ensuring the highest public possible standards of health care for families in our community. Vancouver entrepreneur Jeff Booth said he does not like being called an organizer of the fundraising going towards self-described Freedom Convoy protests, and he insists he's not a facilitator either. But Mr. Booth says he helped create a Bitcoin wallet that has helped channel donations towards the demonstrations. More than $500,000 has been raised through that wallet so far. So basically, crypto bro who loves the Freedom Convoys, who apparently is very, very pro, alt-right and all this kind of like neo-tech kind of side of things, set up one of the crypto wallets that funneled about $500,000 into the convoys themselves. Court extends for order to freeze up $20 million in crypto and cash donations to the crypto convoy. So it sounds like Vancouver's strategic Bitcoin reserve was at least inspired by discussions with a Bitcoin promoter who also raised funds for the convoy. Fun. So happy we elected this ABC mayor. And so that's why I think he's promoting crypto so hard right now.
This world is, with fiat currency is really driving off of a cliff. And so now it ties into what I want to achieve here in Vancouver for not just our four boys, but everyone else who lives here.
He says he wants us to become the cryptocurrency-backed capital of the world. Will it happen? Will we become crypto land? I sure as fuck hope not, but we'll see.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.